Hi everyone and welcome to my guide for the Stone Burst Druid, or the so-called Laser Bear, because in Season 8 we have the boss power with the Wandering Death Beam that will just shoot out every time you use that skill, which is pretty hilarious to watch. This is a very satisfying build to play. I've already shown off the Boulder Druid the other day, which is also really nice, fast and strong on the Druid right now. Both of these are a bit behind the Cataclysm build, but overall Druid is just looking really good in Season 8, so I want to show this off as well. I had a ton of fun with this build, and in Season 8 it got major upgrades and is now actually a really good endgame build. This is a guide that I followed by Danger on max roll, so I've played largely his setup that I will be showing off, and I will be explaining how to make it work. Interestingly, while this is a channeled build, it actually goes pretty fast because it kind of screen clears the entire pack at once most of the time with like 1 or maybe 2 casts. And you see here I can do pits as high as like 70, even 75 in as little as 2 minutes most of the time. So it does go pretty fast despite of what it is. And it's actually a pretty solid farming build. Not quite as fast as something like Cataclysm and Boulder, but if you're looking for something special and unique, it does feel pretty cool to play this build because these massive AoE pops all the time. On top of that, it just has really good power. This build definitely goes into the 90s as well when you push it to the high end, and can easily get its glyphs to 100, for example. I have also done Torment 4 bossing of this, and for example Vashan I can do in like literally 3 casts and then he's gone basically. All the other T4 bosses, they're no problem at all, and my character was still fairly unoptimized here. I had 2 non-ancestral items equipped, and a bunch of aspects were missing a lot of power, and you know, my glyphs are in need of leveling and so on. So let's jump in and see what this is all about. Also, I want to mention that this is actually a build that does not really profit all that much from mythic items as many other builds do. Yeah, we have a Shroud here and a Starless here, but if you don't have those, you can actually replace them here with the Insatiable Fury, which is a very powerful item that is very close in like what you get compared to the Shroud. And then you can also just go for a normal ring where you can put something like a Crash Stone aspect and a bunch of good stats and tempers. And with this, you also will have relatively similar damage output overall compared to the Starless Skies. And we also don't care about the resources from Starless Skies because Mjolnir Ring exists, making everything for free. So it's actually not that hard to get the setup going. As soon as you have a Vasili's Prayer, which you can farm, for example, from Varshan, and then the Mjolnir Ring and Perma Cataclysm, you can channel forever basically and have lots of damage output. You don't have to worry about resources, and you just blast effectively. And at some point you'll get to the point where you will get 100% crit, 100% overpower, you have very consistent damage output, and you just pop packs with 1 cast every time. Now, what does make the setup work? Well, we have the anti-cline burst aspect here. So this one was changed in Season 8, and it now gives you a guaranteed overpower when you channel Stone Burst to its maximum size. So in the past, this was like a very scuffed gameplay where you had to like tap your Stone Burst all the time because it would automatically go to maximum size and then pop. So you just try to like spam it as much as possible. Now you actually have to hold it until you reach the maximum stage, which is 2 jumps in size basically. So you start channeling it. There's like this little like circle, and then it grows, and then it grows again. And at that point you let it go, which usually takes somewhere between like half to 1 second, depending on your attack speed. We have a lot of attack speed here, so you can actually do this pretty quick, but it's not this weird just like spam tap your skill all the time playstyle anymore. And when you do that, you get the guaranteed overpower here. And with overpower, you do all the damage. This build also is very tanky because of overpower. We have Fortify in here, we stack a lot of life. So you are effectively immortal, and you get guaranteed overpowers with crits all the time because you will reach 100% crit chance later. Vasili's Prayer makes it so that you become a bear every time you cast our earth skills, in that case the Stone Burst, and this unlocks a lot of bear related synergies. So there's a bunch of stuff on paragons, glyphs, on the skill tree and so on. There's a lot of stuff that plays into this, making this really powerful, and this helm is actually way better than any other mythic out there, for example. So you want to try to get this as soon as you can. It also unlocks, for example, the power of Wild Heart Hunger and Bestial Rampage. So Bestial Rampage is the key passive that we have here, where when you shapeshift, you get increased damage for bear form and increased attack speed for the wolf form. You can go into wolf form various ways. So for example, you can do Blood Howl, which we have here, or you can also do Shred, or you can also do Claw. So depending on what exactly you're doing, you can do one or the other, or even multiple of those. And like this, you can transform back and forth between bear and wolf, which you basically don't do a few times at the start of the run, and then you're just going to be permanently in bear form, and you will have all these buffs active that you get from the key passive and various other small things on the tree. And then you have Wild Heart Hunger, really supercharging your key passive to incredible values. And they actually recently buffed Wild Heart Hunger. In the past, it was way harder to keep this up, but now you only have to do one shift back and forth to bear and wolf every 20 seconds. And it's very easy to keep this bonus near maximum all the time. So like this, it's very comfy. You have tons of damage reduction. This is very tankily built, and you also run at perma movement speed cap all the time. If you throw in like a jar rune, you actually fly through those pits, and as I have shown you, 2-minute runs are no problem. And most of the other pieces that we have here are effectively just more damage. So we have the changeling's death aspect. Because we are a bear, we can do extra damage to poisoned enemies, which we do very easily with various ways here. Then we have the anti-land burst aspect that I already shown. This is kind of a key thing. And we have retaliation, also just more damage. So this is pretty unconditional damage buffs here from this and this. And well, the Crash Stone is conditional, so it doesn't work on bosses, for example, until you stagger them. But you can also replace this if you feel like you want more boss damage with, for example, something like Conceited or so. There might be some other options. But once you have the starters later, you also have yet another unconditional buff. And even though this says you need to spend primary resources, it actually works when you have Mjolnir Ring active, where you have infinite resources. The same thing goes for the Paragon boards. There is a Paragon node where you need to spend resources in order to get more damage. This also works despite the Mjolnir Ring, so you don't have to worry about that. In danger setup here on Maxwell, he's actually running with the Ravens and the Wolves. This is mainly due to rune synergy. So you'll see here that he has the Nagu plus Xal combo. So with more summons, you get more life. You can actually max out the overflow on this rune here, and then you get 40% life instead of only 20% life, which is a pretty strong damage buff, and you effectively become immortal with all the extra life you already have from other sources. So this is a pretty nice tech, but in my clip, for example, at the start, you might have seen I was not running with the Ravens and not with the Wolves. I had like Earthen Bulwark on my bar, and then I had like Shred here to go a bit faster. So the only reason to have these companions is for this rune synergy. But I was running Neo Rune instead of Nagu, for example, which is just fine and also gives you a good procs on all the other runes. So if you want to do a bit of like, adjustment here on your setup, you can definitely do that, because these things are relatively worthless otherwise. One thing to notice that Stoneburst is quite resource hungry. So if you start playing this build and you actually don't have Mjolnir Ring or like perma cataclysm, at least even with it, then you might be struggling a little bit. You see here the spirit cost is very high, and even if you have a starters, for example, well, it will remain something to solve for. So there are various ways to do this. Number one is the Lum Rune. So you can, for example, do something like Neo plus Lum Rune. I really like that combo whenever I start a new character in this season right now. It just kind of gives you infinite resources every 2 seconds, so you will not have any trouble at all. So you can just slot them in instead of one of the others here. Or if you have the Mjolnir Ring, but you don't quite reset your ultimate cooldown to have permanent cataclysm, then you can also do the Sec rune. So he has that here actually, Igni plus Sec. You can do Neo plus Sec. There are various ways to do this. And this will also just help you out to keep up Cataclysm all the time. But later on, you will not actually need that really, because you will have a long enough duration of your ultimate skills, and you don't have to rely on the Sec rune really that much anymore. So it's just going to be kind of a bit of an addition to make it more consistent. One note here about the Stone of Vehement. This is actually the dedicated Stone Burst totem. There's a unique totem for this build, but it doesn't actually really offer anything special for the build. It's not actually required to play this. It's just bit of damage reduction. It has really good stats and a bit of extra damage, but at least early on you can also just run without this, have a normal totem. So the requirements are not actually too high to get this going. One note here about the amulet as well. You want to have Envenom ranks if you can. Effectively, every Druid build out there is like a crit build that really wants Envenom. Envenom is like the strongest passive in the entire game. It gives you a flat 10% extra damage, and it just rams your DPS really high. So if you can get your hands on an Envenom amulet with something like willpower on it, then any other useful stat, you are golden basically. I was nowhere near having such an amulet like this, and I actually didn't have any Envenom ranks at all. So this can really supercharge your damage later on as well. So you want to try and look out for those. And the poison effect is actually quite easily acquired here with the Overload Spirit Boon. So when you deal damage with your Storm skills, which includes your Hurricane or your Cataclysm, you'll actually poison them. So everything that kind of walks close to you or just randomly gets hit by Cataclysm, which is going off all the time, will be poisoned. So you'll activate that and a bunch of other poison modifiers from your Paragons. And once you have that combo online with the Perma Cataclysm, you don't really have anything to worry about at all. You just walk around, you channel for like a second until you get the maximum size and go kaboom. Reaching the maximum size is pretty important. You will not really deal damage if you let it go too early. So make sure that you kind of get a bit of a muscle memory for this once you play this. And it also depends on your attack speed. With more attack speed, you can channel this faster. So maybe as you improve your setup, and you get more attack speed from some sources, like, you know, your ring, for example, or the bestial rampage and the volatile hunger, your attack speed will actually ramp pretty high. And then you can do this in like 2 times per second or something. And lastly, the Season 8 special, we have that here. The Wandering Death Beam is kind of like the big deal when it comes to channel builds right now. 50% damage multi, you try to aim this towards the elites and especially the boss. This gives you a really nice upgrade against the boss damage basically. And we also have a bunch of other really good modifiers that go with this. Belial's Eye Beam, the 30% increased overpower damage was recently fixed and now works. So this is a nice damage buff. We have another 30% vuln damage here. You always make everything vulnerable with Cataclysm, for example. And we have Outlaw Sharpshooters. Personally, playing on hardcore, even though this is a very tanky build, it feels even more comfy when you go with something like the Blackmailer Sabotage here as a modifier. So I left out the Outlaw, for example, and went with this. And like this, you have like infinite barriers basically, because you fortify all the time with every cast and nothing can touch you basically. You can actually stand there and like torment 4 bosses and just tank them if you want. So that's how tanky that build gets. Another nice addition here would be Lilith's Wind of Hate. I also tried this a little bit with the blisters, so this also helps you take down bosses a little bit faster, as long as you can reliably defeat those blisters in like 1 or 2 casts or something. Then you can actually just, you know, drain the boss HP bar really quickly by, you know, both hitting the boss and also hitting the blisters at the same time. And another thing worth mentioning here is the Hated's Embrace power with the extra crit chance. You can get up to 50% extra crit, and Druid has a lot of crit synergies, like for example the Envenom pathway that I described. We also have some of the Spirit Boons here that give us extra crit damage. So you really want to make sure you hit that 100% or at least very close to it, which might take a little bit of gear to really get there. But in the late game, you do have the 100% crit with just the gear that you got here. But before that, it might be a good idea to also take the Haters Embrace power. So if you're actually lacking, like, let's say more than 10 or 20% crit, then maybe go for that and make sure you cap out, because crits are really important on this class. And you do like a third of your normal damage or so when you don't crit. And that also sums up this guide here. I had a ton of fun with the Stoneburst Druid. I did not expect it to be that great, considering I'm usually more of the, like, you know, high mobile, fast action kind of enjoyer. But it was actually really fun playing this channeled build for me. And with the big pops really make it satisfying, because, you know, the entire pack explodes with the Stoneburst overpower crits, and it just kind of feels good. And you can make it pretty fast with something like the Jar Rune and the Shred, for example, like I did here with my setup. So that was pretty fun. I'll link the Maxwell guide from Danger down in the description as well. I think Druids are just a really good choice right now, so go check it out. And otherwise, hope you enjoyed this video, and see you guys next time.